Welcome to the Untold Story podcast, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum, and it's great to have you with us today. And I'm very glad to have our neighbor and friend, John Levine from the New York Post, joining me today as well. There is a lot going on in New York City right now, folks. And as I said to John when he walked in the door, it's a great day to be a reporter in New York City, because between Eric Adams, the mayor, the first mayor of New York City to be indicted, that fact alone surprised me a little bit. I was like, really? Not one mayor indicted? Because I'm from New Jersey, where all the governor, we have a lot of problems in this neighborhood. And also this news around Diddy, who is now in a barrack-style jail cell in Brooklyn. And guess who he's sharing it with? Sam Bankman-Fried. So you can't make this up, right? John, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, your reaction, we just watched Eric Adams, and given what we learned, Eric Adams came out to do the pre-buttal. You're about to hear from the prosecutors, but let me tell you a little bit first. And then we heard from the prosecutor, who we're becoming quite familiar with, actually, Damian Williams.
Well, I'll first clarify that I'll say that I'm not an attorney, and I'm not steeped in these kind of campaign, finance issues in my career. I'm just a humble reporter. I read the indictment like anyone else can do online.
Same.
But my first impression was that it's a little bit thin, to be frank. It's a lot of like, well, he accepted improper gifts from Turkish officials, but those are mostly in the forms like, well, an upgrade on a Turkish Airlines flight or a discounted hotel room. And in return for these services, there was some kind of quid pro quo. But if you read the indictment, the quo of the quid pro quo is Adams appeared to open a building a few weeks earlier than he should have, so the Turkish president could speak there before, and they didn't have some fire code inspection, a bureaucratic thing. That in 10 years of alleged bribery, the only return they seem to have got was a picayune thing like that. And so I didn't see that there was much of a there. And the way the indictment is written, it's like he got a free upgrade on a flight. It's like he stole the Hope Diamond. It's really not. I didn't think there was a there. And in terms of the straw donations, and I'll clarify, a straw donation is when, like, I want to give money to a candidate, but there's some reason I can't. Say I'm a foreign Turkish, national, and I'll give it to you, Martha, and then you give it to the candidate, and it's, secretly from me. Even in that case, most of the criminality I saw in the indictment, it was staffers. It was Adam's staffer texting with the Turkish individual saying, okay, let's do the crime. It wasn't Adams himself, as it was the most egregious stuff I saw. And clearly none of those staffers were named because they're now obviously cooperating with the feds. So it seems thin. And I will also say, and Adams has said this, and I think there's some legitimacy to it, you can't extricate this indictment from the fact that he was a Democrat, but he was not a progressive mayor, and he was trying to make a lot of headway on things like, reforming our criminal justice system, and by that I mean incarcerating more people, not less.
He's a former captain in the New York City Police Department.
And a former Republican. Yes. And he talked about the migrants, which was sort of the ultimate sacred cow, about how migrants were destroying our city. And, he is a Democrat, but he has to manage this town. And when you have to spend billions and billions of dollars on migrants, that's money that's coming out of police, it's coming out of schools, it's coming out of libraries, and it's right on his doorstep. And he talked about how either the city needed a massive bailout from the federal government, or we were not going to be able to pay our debts, and we were going to have to make massive cuts. And that upset a lot of people in Washington, D.C. There's no question. For which the migrant crisis is a huge embarrassment. These migrants coming from Texas and being deposited in front of the White House, in front of Kamala Harris's residence in Washington, D.C. It's hugely embarrassing.
Let me ask you this, politically, I know the former president would love to win New York. It's obviously a huge stretch. It hasn't happened since Reagan. It's not to say it could never happen. Politically, what do they really gain from pushing him out? And is it Washington? Let's just assume for a moment that he's correct in this contention, and you're, laying out some examples of why he could possibly be correct in this contention, that politically people wanted him out. Tell us about the dynamic here in New York, because it feels like it would happen more at the local New York level.
Well, I would say the migrant thing is a national issue. And when the mayor of New York City starts publicly going off script and saying the migrant situation is a problem in New York is not the only city with migrant crises. It's in D.C., it's in Chicago, it's in a lot of big blue cities. And it's happening in swing states where the mayor of New York is a national figure, even though he is just the mayor of New York. So his words potentially do have a lot of ammunition, especially if they start getting into Republican attack ads.
I mean, he went after Biden, and when Biden came here to New York, he didn't sit down with them. They didn't meet, which is unusual. So clearly there was some friction here, and it probably is based in what you're outlining for us. So is he's not going to go to jail. Can he still be the mayor? I just heard Jeanine Pirro talking about it from a legal perspective. She's like, I don't see how he can deal with all this and still be mayor.
I don't know that he won't go to jail. I mean, we have to see exactly what the feds try to go for, but I don't know that there's a way to remove him in it. I mean, technically, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, can remove him according to the rules. I don't know who exactly set that up, but it's not really likely. And I know there was an example of a New York State county executive in Rensselaer County, Steve McLaughlin, and he was indicted, and she did not move to remove him. In fact, he beat that indictment, and he's still the county executive of Rensselaer County. You could look that up. So I don't see her getting involved, and the city council really doesn't have a viable mechanism to get rid of him either. And we have to say, Adams doesn't have like a job to go to if he resigns, and he has a lifestyle that he needs to maintain. So from the basic economics of it, I don't see him leaving. And so I think he's going to play this out, and I think he's going to fight it in court, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, he said as much today that he intends to stay, and I tend to agree with you. I think he's going to dig in his heels and try to fight this thing and see how far it goes. I mean, one of the questions is what did Turkey really want? What did they hope they could get in terms of influence? Because I would imagine, it's probably they wanted something more than just, can you open the building early can you talk to the fire inspector and get us in there early?
That's a great question, because when I read the indictment, I couldn't really tell what Turkey wanted. It wasn't like Turkey called up and said, hey, the ambassador's son just killed a guy. Can you do us a favor? It was really, really to do 10 years of bribery, I air quote bribery, to just get a building opened earlier so the president could give a speech. It doesn't seem like there's a there. And I don't see from the indictment what other stuff Turkey was really getting. So
let's compare this to other cases, because Damian Williams, people have become pretty familiar with him. Sam Bankman-Fried, Menendez, he's handled a lot of these New York, Southern District of New York cases. With regard to Menendez, for example, we saw the gold bars, we saw the Mercedes, we saw this pattern that ultimately pushed him out. Do you see anything similar here? And we were also discussing the odd situation of Nancy Pelosi and why it doesn't get more attention that she and her husband just made $500,000 on Visa stock because they sold it just a couple months before the government opened a huge investigation against Visa. So compare what you're seeing in this indictment to some of these other things out there.
You tell me, are there gold bars in Gracie Mansion that the Turks gave him? Stuffing
well, they were in there this morning. 25 people went to pick up a phone, and they ended up going through the whole house. So we'll see.
If they find Turkish gold bars in Gracie Mansion, maybe we'll have another conversation. Yeah. And as you said, you just mentioned, Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, is probably the most successful stock picker of all time. And 3 months, he just sold $500,000 worth of Visa stock. And then 3 months later, Visa is hit with a federal antitrust lawsuit. Wow, incredible. And again, this is not the first time he's just been to uncanny predictions. There's open criminality happening right now at the highest levels of government, but because Nancy Pelosi is a progressive, there's zero attention by the Department of Justice, and there's zero attention by most of the national press. The New York Post covered that story. I'm sure Fox picked it up too, but where else is it going to go? I bet you won't be reading in the New York Times.
Yeah, there's an X account that just follows her, she and her husband. She says it's all him. They don't ever discuss it.
No, never.
That's their contention. But there's an account on X which follows all these are all open book transactions when you make these kind of stock transactions. And NVIDIA, he also made a ton of money on NVIDIA shortly before the whole chip deal went down. And it is striking that, maybe they never do. Maybe they have this Chinese wall and they never ever discuss these things, but there's not even an investigation.
No one even cares to know.
No one cares.
And you'll never see her asked about this ever.
She's been asked about it, I think once I saw, and maybe more than that, but she shut it down instantly. She glared down the reporter, which is fine. We're used to that. And then she said, no, we don't ever discuss those things. And like moving on. I mean,
it's actually incredible. Occasionally you will see Nancy Pelosi asked a real question, and she'll look at you like you're like a dog that just took a crap on the carpet. Like, how dare you?
Think about Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart went to jail, okay? It turned out to not, didn't go to jail for insider trading.
For a crime she didn't even commit.
This is true. So, she was suspected of insider trading, and then she said something untrue to the FBI agent, unrelated to the trade, and so she went to prison for, I think, 6 months for lying to an FBI agent. It had nothing to do with the actual trade. And so compare that to not even, we're not even going to investigate.
No. And I mean, you don't think, and I'm not, without making any accusations, the probable cause of insider trading is to launch a probe is surely there. So, or maybe it's just been investigated and it's so well kept and so well covered up and they don't do any leaks, but no one seems to care.
The Untold Story continues right after this.
I mean, we love New York City. It's the most fascinating, vibrant, crazy city in the world. And you posted a picture today that I thought was really interesting, which was Eric Adams standing on a stage. I'm pretty sure they were in Times Square, and holding up a key to the city that he had just given to Diddy Combs, right?
Yep.
Diddy Combs. So now Sean Diddy Combs is in this holding jail in Brooklyn, in a correctional facility in Brooklyn, and it's a lot, right? Since then, since he was given that big golden key to the city, and now he's downtown on suicide watch.
Just over a year ago, the two of them stood in Times Square, all
life
smiles.
Life can turn very quickly, right?
Yeah, well, life comes at you fast. There's no question about it. And now Diddy is apparently on suicide watch in lockup, so it's a very serious situation for him. And if you had said to me a year after that photo was taken, both of these men will be under indictment in a year, it wouldn't have been on my bingo card. So it's certainly, it's crazy. And I actually do know that when the video of Diddy, that horrific video, came out a few months before the indictment of him assaulting his girlfriend at the time, I know that Adams and his people asked for the key to be returned. And it was very surreptitiously returned. But no, it's crazy world we live in. It's a mad, mad world, Martha.
Let me ask you this, going back to Eric Adams. Quickly, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman from New York, she said he has to resign. So explain to everybody the dynamic. Why would she be so adamant that he has to resign? And I think you touched on it a bit before, but explain.
You got to understand, it's not just AOC. A number of progressives, especially in the city council, and maybe some in Albany too, have been very, very hard. Adams got to go. Adams got to go. And why is that? Are they really concerned about the criminality? They were calling for him to leave before there was an indictment.
Right.
But it was just an investigation. And you have to ask yourself, well, if Adams goes, what comes next? And I will tell you, if Adams leaves, we will have an interim mayor in the form of the public advocate. That's a man named Jumaane Williams, a very, very far left progressive. And then
he has been on this program.
He's been up, sure. And I've seen him on Fox before. He will engage, but he's a far left radical progressive. Hates Israel. Go look at the tweets. It's all there.
Yeah, I watched an ad. He ran for governor back in 2021. I want to say I watched one of his ads. This is what he's openly, very progressive.
He's not hiding anything.
That's who he is, yeah.
Then, he's in for 90 days, then there's a special election. And it's not like a normal election in that there's a primary and the parties pick one. It would just be a big open mess of different people running.
And who would be in that? Any thoughts?
Anyone could run. I mean, I know that you've got people now that want to be mayor, like the comptroller, Brad Lander, another far-left progressive. State Senator Jessica Ramos, another far-left progressive. The field was already very wide of people who wanted to challenge Adams in the Democratic primary before all this news broke. So they're definitely running in a special election. And then, it's anyone's guess who might jump in on the Republican side. And Republicans have this delusion that, because it's an unusual race, maybe we can sneak in one of our guys. And we have ranked choice voting in New York City now, so which no one even knows how that works, but it's basically where instead of just voting for one person, you can pick a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on choice, and if your first doesn't win, your vote gets reallocated. It's a system, and a lot of New Yorkers have no idea how it works, and it's going to be mad, it's going to be crazy, but the most likely outcome is if Adams leaves, is we end up with a super far left progressive mayor that certainly won't open their mouth about migrants. In fact, will probably take a lot more migrants. And of course, if we need money, there's always taxes. You can always just raise taxes on people, and that will be coming, because at the end of the day, cities and states are not like the federal government. We have to balance our books. We can't run gigantic deficits. We can't print money into infinity. So if we overrun our expenditures, we have to raise the money one way or another.
Yeah, I think Andrew Cuomo's on that list as well, people who would like to be the mayor of New York City, and we'll keep a close eye on that. It's worth pointing out, you were talking about Eric Adams and the things he has tried to do. His hands are so tied by the council, and the council is so far left, but some of the things that he was somewhat successful in was cracking down on crime in New York, cleaning up the streets to an extent, because we all remember how bad it was. It's easy to forget how bad it was, but there was a time when you had tent cities all over Lower Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
And he, basically made a quiet decree and said, you can't sleep on the street in a tent. We're clearing them all out, right? So he has made, I think, good faith efforts as a former New York City police officer too. I mean, this is his background, to come at this in as aggressive way as he can. But the no bail laws, I remember one of the city council chairs, she said, there's no way we're going backward on that. We're not going backward on no bail. So he's had there's only so much that he can do.
And also, you've got Albany. So bail, I believe, is an Albany issue where he's
I should have made that clear. Exactly. That's
exactly
right.
You have the same clutch of psycho-progressives in Albany, too, and they run in these super low turnout primaries that are dominated by activists. They happen, in the middle of summer on like a Thursday, and who's paying attention but 1,000 people who are the crazy activists. Yeah. And you really... They're very institutionally committed to things getting worse, and they don't believe in policing, and they don't believe that you have a right to feel safe. A person's right to go on the subway and act like a crazy person is more important than your right to ride the subway in safety. Right. And it's not an accident the way we live. It's a result of real philosophical beliefs that are held by people like Jumaane Williams and Brad Lander and Jessica Ramos and many, many people who could be mayor if we lose Eric Adams.
I want to talk to you before I let you go about former President Trump, because he's going to be speaking today. So by the time people see this, he will have already spoken. He's going to give some remarks, and he's in the middle of trying to appeal this case that fined him, not fined. Basically, there was a decision that he would have to pay $454 million after real estate discrepancies. Like he said, this property is worth this, and the bank said it's worth that. And many observers of this case said there were no injured parties, and so that's what they're discussing right now in the Supreme Court in New York. It's very interesting. I was watching some of these proceedings earlier, but he seems to love coming back to New York. He did that event in the Bronx. He did another one. I think he was in Long Island the other day. And there's discussion that he wants to do something at Madison Square Garden at the end of next month, before the election. What do you make of his, continued affinity with the city he grew up in, and his sort of obvious desire to sort of believe that he could potentially win it?
I mean, he moved out of New York, famously relocated to Florida. He instituted SALT caps on state and local tax deductions, which
he says he's going to overturn now.
Which really upset a lot of people.
Yes, it upset a lot of people. And just to remind people, so that was part of the tax bill that Trump really wanted to get across the finish line. And one of the things that he had to give up in that negotiation was that he would put a cap, that he would institute a cap on state and local taxes. Yeah. People can write off here because the taxes are so high.
Right.
And so he said, all right, fine, we'll put a cap on how much you can declare on your tax filings for that really outrageous.
So now we've got to eat the high taxes. But what we could do is just lower the state and local taxes.
We could.
But that's the unspoken.
Because we would.
The state could. That's always the unspoken.
Right.
No, he definitely does have an affinity for New York City. He does keep going back here. And something I'll say, he's really not going to win New York. I think we should just really stop with the does Trump have a chance in New York? Reagan won
I mean,
in
he got
1980.
within 10 points. That was around the assassination attempt time and before Biden dropped out.
Yes, but you mentioned Ronald Reagan. He did win New York in 1980. But people forget there was a big spoiler in that race, too, who I believe, a liberal spoiler that siphoned 10 points away from, who was it, Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
So he's not going to win New York. I want to just put that out there.
It was John Anderson, I think.
That sounds right. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
We could look that up.
Yeah.
But so I don't know what he's doing here. I don't see the campaign logic to it, except that he seems to be having fun when he comes. And, I guess things are so national now that when he does an event at Madison Square Garden, it's not like 100 years ago where no one will see it unless they went to Madison Square Garden.
It's worth him spending his time here because it gets so much attention.
Right. And all the national press is here too.
Yeah.
So it amplifies it to the whole country and earned media and all that business. But I do wonder why he's not in the swing states more. And, again, New York is not a swing state. Kamala Harris will win New York.
All right. Before I let you go, just one last thought on this Diddy case. Where does it go from here? Do you know? I mean, how he's obviously, they're not going to let him out because they think he's a flight risk, which is probably a wise move. Where does this go? I
think he will be swiftly convicted, and then he will be incarcerated for, and then it will be big news, and then we will stop thinking about it, much like R. Kelly, someone like that, it was huge, and then it happened, and then it's over.
All right, we'll be watching. It's a good day, as I said. When I say good day, I just mean it's an interesting day for a reporter in New York City because there is a lot going on in the city right now. And it's always good to talk to John Levine. Thank you very much, John. John Levine, a reporter of all things local and national politics and entertainment from the New York Post. Great writer. You should follow him on X and see what he's popping each day. John, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great to see you. I'm Martha McCallum. That's the Untold Story podcast for today. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Make sure to rate and review. For more podcasts, go to foxnewspodcast.com. Listen ad-free with the Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.